Oh my goodness gracious. So I just invite you to feel what you're feeling right now. That vibration of the music that cuts through the dross of the world, that takes you right to the heart of the matter, does it not? And in that flow, we can feel something. We feel perhaps love. We feel perhaps a vibration, a buzz within our very being. It's a feeling tone, and I just invite us to become more and more aware of that feeling tone, not only of love, but of the challenging feelings that we have in our experience of life. Because if we seek to suppress any of it, in some ways we cut ourselves off from all of it. And so we're going to explore that today. This idea that our feelings become the doorway to awakening itself. Our feelings become the doorway to love and to freedom. And so that's our conversation this day. And how can we be in that flow if we're stagnating any aspect of our life? We know that water must flow, and that when water doesn't flow, it becomes stagnant and it becomes stinky, and it's actually in the movement towards a dying body. That which it supports begins to die, and it no longer flourishes. And that is similar to what we experience in the flow of life. And so we seek not to cut any of it off. In fact, what we've been talking about all month is how love embraces all things. How love embraces all things that life may present to us. And that in so doing, it becomes the call for us to rise above those challenges, the challenging feelings, so that we may discover where our belief system is limiting us. And that's where those things that we would call negative feelings would come from. But you see, the proposition is a double-edged sword. Likewise, how many of us suppress those good and happy feelings that we have? I know that I have. I have a memory of being very happy in my life one day. Nothing spectacular was particularly happening. In fact, I was doing something rather mundane. I was in my home and I was making a smoothie. And in my home making a smoothie, something came over me and I felt happiness. I felt joy. I felt attuned and aware to the goodness of life in such an ordinary moment. And then, almost in the very next breath, a thought came, well, don't get too happy because something might happen. And you want to be prepared for whatever that something might be, so you don't want to be, you don't want it to be a disaster, so you got to keep a kind of even keel. Does anybody ever do that? Am I the only one who does something like that? Yeah, don't be too happy because it's going to come crashing down, right? That type of idea. And those type of thoughts, those type of ways of being are very subtle. But those subtle ways of being block us, stagnate us just as much as, pushing down other types of feeling that we think that we should be avoiding, especially being a new thought, a positive, practical, progressive way of life, right? That we push away those feelings that are less than positive as well. And what I know is that love says to embrace it all, to trust it all, to allow it all, in order to thereby transcend it all. And so that's our conversation this day, that feelings are the doorway. And there's a quote that I found, and it's attributed to Lao Tzu, who 6th century BC, so well before the one that we call Jesus was incarnated into this experience. And this is what he says. The human spirit has its source in the divine fountain, which must be permitted to flow freely through man, through us all. And so this human spirit was never meant to be controlled. And so this human spirit, how do we control it? We control it by planning. We control it by being attached to our planning. We control it by being attached to the way life needs to show up for us in specific ways. And when it doesn't, we try to make it happen. We're in a culture that values pulling ourselves up by the bootstrap and taking the bull by the horns, right? And making things happen. And one of the reasons I loved this community when we were courting, when we were courting one another, was because of your vision and mission statement. And because of the fact that every Sunday y'all stood, as we still do, and we declare spiritual awakening. We say that our vision is a spiritually awakened world living in peace, love, and joy. We say it every Sunday. Do we not? And not only that we transform lives that transform the world. I thought these guys know what's going on. I want to be with them because that's what I'm up to in my life. And when you join with like-minded people, look out, man, there's a power that gets unleashed. And that's what we're up to here. Let us not forget this. Let us not forget that what was once a teaching called New Thought that came up and raised us out of a victim-level consciousness that said life is happening to us. And let us not end with the idea that we're co-creators with spirit and that yes, we cut our teeth on manifestation and demonstration. We practice our prayer, our affirmation. We practice observing our mind and then changing it. That's our practice, not to control it, but to clear the way for the flow of spirit in our lives to guide us. Of my own self, I do nothing. Of my own self, I really know nothing. It's Sergeant Schultz. We've done him before. I know nothing. And I know we don't like to say that in New Thought, and yet the aspect that knows nothing is that ego aspect that believes itself to be separate from what we claimed in the beginning of our service, as above, so below, that God is, Spirit is. Spirit flow through me before every decision I make. Spirit flow through me before everything I do. Spirit flow through me in my relationships. Spirit flow through me in what I think is my source and supply and substance in the world. Spirit flow through me because I know nothing. I know nothing. You know how I know this? I've proved it multiple times in my life. I've totally proved it, haven't you? And so that proving, all I have to do is say, you know what? I give. And every Sunday when we stand up and we say we're spiritually awakened, it doesn't say I'm René awakened. It doesn't say I'm Ann awakened. It doesn't say I'm Gail awakened. It says spiritually awakened, the Christ of our being awakens. Now, Lao showed up way before the one that we started to call Christ, and thought it was attached with that identity. But Christ is a principle. And this principle is birthless and deathless. It is eternal now and forevermore. And it is within me. Say, it is within me. Ooh, take that breath right there. Feel this. God is I am. God is I am. Christ in me, my hope and glory. Christ in me, my hope and glory. Feel that. And so what continues on this quote is anyone who flows as life flows has solved the enigma, I like that word, enigma of human existence and needs no other power. Man, we don't need to be plugging into the power out there, thinking that it's our source. Remember, we've talked about each of us being that filament of light like a light bulb. And we have this cord that's hanging out over here, and we keep plugging it into other people, other places, other things, thinking it is going to serve us, sustain us. But when we plug into the only socket that fits into, that God consciousness, we need no other power. When we align there, man, goodness gracious, do this. All power under heaven and earth abides here, flows through me. Yes, come on. All power under heaven and earth abides here and flows through me. I need no other power. Woo, relax there. You can quit looking. There's nowhere else to look, nowhere else to go. Decide to be found this day. Plug into that socket. Now, it doesn't mean that your relationships do not fall within that realm, or the source through which God's good appears to flow to you. But don't forget, it's a resonance. It's coming to you because it came from you. It's a vibration. It's attractive. And so all of this falls within that realm once we plug in. Now, it goes on to give a little warning. Anything is evil that blocks the flow. So what blocks the flow in your life? Fear, negative feelings, maybe. You don't want to feel those feelings. Oh, it's so messy, isn't it? You know, just like last week, it was like, fearlessness is the characteristic of mastery. And I'm like, no, anything but that. And this week I'm like, no, anything but feeling my feelings. Because sometimes it's inconvenient, isn't it? Right? You know, sometimes when you start crying, it's not so attractive and it's not pretty, but it's way better to do that than to bottle yourself up, to shove it down within you, and it outpictures as diagnoses, or it projects out as something that's going to plop someone right up beside their head as an anger or resentment. And so anything is evil that blocks the flow of creative action. Somebody was sharing the other day, they said somebody was bored, and so they took a full-time job. And I'm thinking to myself, Reverend Michael Beckwith pops in, and he said that boredom was the energy that it takes to block creativity. So anytime you think you're bored, check in with yourself. What's really going on? Where am I blocking the flow? And everything is healthy that flows with the universe. Everything is healthy that flows with the universe. So back to our vision, back to the declaration everybody makes. You know what they say, be careful what you ask for, because anything unlike it is going to show up, right? You say, I want to be more loving, and then it feels like everything unloving seems to happen, right? And what we know here is that when that happens, it's for us. It's showing us where we don't believe. It's showing us our disbelief in that God is all, love is all. And when it shows up, oh gosh, remember, it's that goody-goody moment. Oh, goody-goody, I got an opportunity. I have an opportunity to practice what we keep talking about. I'm going to practice pausing. I'm going to practice reflecting within. What is this here to teach me? And so when you stand up and you say, I want spiritual awakening, and I'm about transformation, does it sometimes feel like everything unlike that might show up in your life, in our life, even in our community, the challenges that we face? I always say that church and life is a smokescreen. It's just something to keep us busy while we're awakening. And the challenges inherent in all of the areas of our life are there to be stepping stones and not tombstones. These are principles that we've talked about. So this is a community, I believe, that has done this. Until you fully decide to come into life as the presence of Christ, which means the presence of love, to embody only that reality, no matter what anybody says, no matter what happens. Right there, that's when life begins. So say with me our vision again. I spiritually awaken and live. I'm switching it. I should have told you first. I spiritually awaken and live in peace, love, and joy. I transform my life. It transforms. The world transforms. Breathe here. Can anybody say in this moment, and this is just for you, I fully decide to be the presence of love. I fully decide to be the presence of love. Maybe say it to the self in this moment. If you feel like saying it out loud, say it out loud with me. I fully decide to be the presence of love. I fully decide to be as Christ. And we breathe that in. So how you feeling? Did you say fine? Hi. Oh, hi. How's everybody else feeling? Well, somebody say fine. Thank you. Thank you. How you feeling? Fine. Have you ever heard that before? How you feeling? I feel fine. Do you believe them when they say that? I never do. Do you feel it when you say it? No, not at all. Not at all. I'm going to invite you to assume whoever is asking you is sincerely interested in actually how you feel. Okay? But when we say FINE, which I learned this week, FINE is an acronym for feelings inside, not expressed. Talk about blocking the flow. Feelings inside, not expressed. So the idea here is to allow the feelings to come up and out. Now, I know for me that when I suppress my feelings, something happens to whatever that is. Something stagnates right there, right at that point, whatever the genesis of it is. And I may not even know, and you may not even know the genesis of it. And that's okay. That's okay right now. So I was out to lunch with a friend. Her name's Barbara. We were at Rosie's Italian in Toledo, Ohio. I remember this. And while we were having lunch, there was a gnat flying around. We were outside, and it was summertime, and it was warm. That scene doesn't show it. I'm the girl who's swatting away the gnat. And it's like we become preoccupied with the gnat that's flying around that nobody else can see. She thought I was crazy. Look at that girl. She's looking at the other girl. She thinks she's crazy. Like, what are you swatting at? I'm like, there's a gnat. Our suppressed feelings become like that gnat. It becomes the story that we tell, the story that we build around our suppressed feelings that we don't want to feel, our unhealed areas, and we tell a story about it. And usually we do share that story. We share that story, and people are really used to that story. Ask your best friends, ask your partners, ask your spouse, what's your story? Do it in a loving way. What story do you hear me saying, repeating? That becomes that gnat that nobody else is really paying attention to because they don't really know what it's truly about, and neither do we. And that gnat flying around, we're always trying to make it shine. Look at my gnat. Look at my story. Look at how terrible it is. Look at how awful it is. This is why I am the way I am. It's like we want to take that gnat out and make that little gnat shine. Does anybody try to make that little gnat shine instead of your light shine? And I'm not trying to be callous here. I'm actually just trying to point out that when we suppress our feelings, they become idols. They become things that we place before God. They become things that become an excuse for us really shining our light. And the antidote to that is to embrace it, to love it, to allow it, to have an inquiry with ourselves. What does this mean? Being Father's Day, of course, I think about my dad. I think about my dad, and I've shared stories about my dad before. My favorite story of my dad, the end of his life. And I've shared with you before, my dad's name was Guido, and he was a typical man of his era, of his generation, of his culture. And he had a lot of bravado, and had a bookie, and he had all kinds of fun things. He was a very colorful man, and I loved him. But I didn't always feel that way. There was a time in my life when I was very angry with him. And I told a story about my anger and my hurt, and I blamed him for some of the way that my life turned out. And my sister one day came up to me and said, "You know what? You better figure this out, because he's not always going to be around." And I spent the next 25, 30 years taking walks with my dad and telling him how I felt. Just sharing with how I felt. And I'm grateful he invited it, welcomed it, let me have my process. I'm grateful for that. Not everybody's dad maybe does that in this lifetime, and that's okay, but there are others who fulfill that role. And God, as source, can fulfill that role. So towards the end of his life, I lived away from him for a long time, and I decided to move home. I didn't know then that he only had 4 more years left. And about 4 months before he transitioned, he went into surgery. And it was a risky surgery. So we were preparing for him to transition. And it was hard. We didn't want that. But he made it. He came out of surgery, and he had tears on his face. They were glistening, his cheeks. And his eyes had a light in them. And he had this awakening, if you will. He said, I said, "Dad, what happened? I can tell something shifted in you." And we'd been having these kind of conversations for years. And he shared with me, he said, "You know, there I was in the afterlife with what I assumed to be like God, looking at my life. And what my life was like an obstacle course." And he starts laughing because he could see that the obstacles that seemed so big, so real in his life were actually little challenges for him to actually remember who he was. And he said he was told he had more to do here, but that he had such a chuckle, such a little grin and laugh about this idea of life being an obstacle course. And that was in 2011. I never knew I would be teaching about life as an obstacle course. But that is what we are in. Our life, just as it is, just as it isn't, is our ashram or our obstacle course for awakening. And it's created just for each of us. Because we kind of created it, we might not be aware of that. So it's a self-created, customizable, little ashram obstacle course for our awakening. And each and every one of those little stones represents a challenge. Like an obstacle course, it's a game. It's a challenge. And on one end, it's your life. And on the other end, I ask for the pearly gates of heaven on earth. Because our awakening happens here. It happens in our lived experience. And so each one of those could potentially represent repressed feelings of some sort. That when we embrace them, when we sit with them, when we inquire about them, when we ask, what are they here to teach us? It's revealed to us. We become intimate with our life, just as it is, just as it isn't, because it's perfect. Can you say that with me? My life, just as it is, and just as it isn't, is perfect. It's my ashram, my obstacle course for my own awakening. And guess what else? You cannot fail. You cannot fail. Say, I can't fail. Take that home, put that on in your journal, and watch all the thoughts and feelings that come up about that. That's a little nugget to practice with. So that's our practice this week, our life, just as it is, just as it isn't, to heal. This month's been about healing, my friends. This is how we heal. Love heals all things. We're going to embrace all feelings. We're going to allow everything is as it ought to be now. We're going to trust that there's a wisdom. We're going to embrace with love. And remember, at the beginning of the month, I said we can't. And at the beginning of this talk, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how. But there's something within each of us that does.